And here we go. Pitboss review number 6, the ongoing saga of the working poor, the culture war. Here we are in my basement in December. What's the date today? December 7th. Christmas is coming up soon. I'm not looking forward to Christmas coming up soon. But here we are regardless. It was like a minus 40 evening last night. My truck barely started. My client today had frostbitten hands from helping a friend do some outside work and grabbing metal with his bare hands. So that's kind of disappointing. So yeah, what's been going on recently? I guess the new trend I've got. If you're watching this on video, you might see my snazzy, fancy new, cover video art. My new podcast art. I'm doing. I'm just kind of playing around with some different ideas on how to, propagate the art form that is known as podcasting, that is known as comedy. That's what I'm running with right now. I'm a comedian, a cultural commentary comedian, and I crack jokes because people are fucking dumb, and we're living in a time when the dumb people are writing the narrative more and more and more. So I ended up. I'm on Instagram. It's one of the only social medias that I have. And I saw these fancy new, what are they called? Artwork. These fancy new avatars, I guess is what they're called, right? Avatars, graphics that people are getting done that are done by an artificial intelligence. It's an app called Lensa. So I'm like, okay, just for shits and giggles, I'm going to run some graphics through this. I'm going to update, I'm going to see how this works. So I downloaded it. It's kind of handy. You can do some basic photo editing with it. But if you want to pay a few bucks, you can get some custom graphics made with the artificial intelligence takes the graphics and absolutely improvises it. They're caricatures of you, and so I'm going to use those for some graphics. I'm going to use it for the podcast graphics. I've got my partners down here. If you hear some coughing, or she answers questions in the background, so if you hear coughing, she's getting over COVID. So it is what it is. So yeah, we've got these new graphics, and they're pretty badass. Like I'll give this program credit where credit's due, and I posted some on my tattoo Instagram. And a well-meaning meathead decided to pop up, and he just wanted to let me know that these things are data mining. That don't you know when you sign up for this thing that you're participating in data mining by giving them access to your photographs and uploading those? And I'm like, well, yeah, like everything. All social media we're part of is part of data mining. Like I think it's interesting. This guy points out, he's like, not only is the machine collecting your biometric information, it's also taking the art from your body, which it will use in future creations, and whether it credits the artist or not. And I think that's the most ridiculous. Yeah. So what? Yeah. At this point, if we're using the internet, we are already participating in data mining. Another friend of mine, he pointed out the only thing that made me hesitate is that now those pics are owned and used by Lensa's parent company, which is a facial recognition company that gets used by different law enforcement agencies around the world. And I'm like, yep. And I've also been arrested. And I've also had the photograph of myself taken in and put in an Interpol data bank. I've been arrested in Saskatoon. I've had Saskatoon City Police, Canadian policing networks have access to my biometric data. They literally scan your eyes when they arrest you. They take your fingerprints. In Japan, they literally do your DNA. So my DNA is in a digital data bank somewhere. This is nothing new. If you are familiar at all with what artificial intelligence is going to happen, or what will happen with artificial intelligence, pretty much everything that you upload into the internet is going to be accessible to it. Every search that you've ever made from the time you were 13 years old, the time you had access to unrestricted internet, is going to be accessible to the artificial intelligence. All of your emails, all of your search history, all of your posts are already being saved in a warehouse, an NSA warehouse in Utah. None of this is new. It's all easy to search. So I'm almost at the point where I'm past giving a shit. So this art, this Lenza art, I believe that's Lenza artificial intelligence. This art that they're creating, the avatars that I'm using for the Pitboss review are very much me surrounded with this biomechanical kind of creepy energy coming in, and I'm either fighting it off like Guardians of the Galaxy, or I'm just right in the middle of it because I see it for what it is. This is the future. We're living in really, really like a technological, almost spiritual war. People don't think this. They keep talking about, oh, we're in a culture war. We're in a culture war. No, we're dead center. Like, and you could call this a conspiracy. You can call it whatever the hell you want. I really don't care. But I am very much. You could call it a culture war. You can call it a class war. You can call it an ethical war. You can call it an evolution towards a higher ascension, a higher point of ascension. What it really is we are dead center in the middle of a spiritual war at this time. I firmly believe this. And now that's a pretty wide berth, what you would call spirituality, whether you believe or not that you could say it's ethics. You could say it's a psychological warfare, warfare. That's been going on forever. Because my personal belief is that primal religions were an attempt by primitive or primal people to describe the higher elements of psychology in an analogous way, how it attributed to the universal workings of things. And the goal of almost every spiritual tradition in the world is self-evolution to become the best human you can be. Modern psychology, in the terms Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud and Abraham Maslow, they talk about this as individuation, self-actualization, the goal of healing yourself and evolving yourself to be the highest version of yourself you can be, compartmentalizing the lower parts of yourself towards the higher, more noble, ethical parts of yourself. And actually, they talk about as you compartmentalize the lower parts of yourself, you have no choice but to act more and more morally, right? Now, when we talk about a culture war or a spiritual war, we're really got to balance whether or not what's going on in our culture is geared towards people compartmentalizing their lower selves in favor of their higher self. Looking at our cultural direction, are we really doing that? Or are we pandering to the lowest, basest animal instincts that we have, securing survival, security, sex, materialism, and status? Or are we struggling towards those higher inclinations, be it communication, compassion, understanding, creativity, insight, like self-actualization, self-awareness, true self-awareness? And I look at almost everything going on in our world through this lens. And you can call it psychology, you can call it spirituality. We're talking about the same things. And we got to really wonder whether what we're seeing out here on these streets, whether we're talking about the value systems of people coming to our country and doing immoral things, whether we're talking about the value systems of these individuals that really feel they need to wag their dicks and their pussies in front of children, whether we're talking about children being encouraged to identify as something that they aren't and to mutilate themselves, no longer are we dealing with right and wrong, or with left and right. We're dealing with right and wrong. We're dealing with moral and immoral. And unfortunately, I see so much of this world written in reverse. What is right is now wrong, or what is wrong is being propagated as what is being right. If it feels good, we are encouraged to do it. Sacrificing what feels good for the greater good is considered a bad, when really that is a good thing. Almost everything noble and good that a person can accomplish in this life is the result of sacrificing some uncomfortable element of themselves for the greater good. This is the lesson, the ultimate lesson in Christianity of Jesus. He was willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for the good of mankind. He paid the ultimate price, the scourging at the pillar, the walk of sorrows or the path of sorrows, and his ultimate crucifixion for the sins of man. The fact that he was willing to take the burden of everybody on himself and go through that suffering to pay off the debt of mankind's iniquity. Now that is the ultimate example of self-sacrifice. Now, in our families, that's just one. Like the Buddha has lessons of self-sacrifice. Like it's a cultural tradition. It's one of those perennial traditions. I'm not a Christian. I recognize the value of Christianity, but I have no interest in being lumped in with Christian right-wing nationalists at all, because I think their version of Christianity is completely skewed. But at the same time, I can see the commonality with these people because they recognize that there is right and there is wrong. And they recognize the fact that something is profoundly wrong in our society. And nobody's looking at it. And you're not allowed to say it out loud, because the narrative will call you a name if you question, hey, is that a good thing to do? I'll give you an example. Like, okay, I am in the process of becoming a better person because I was a fucking degenerate for a long time. I'm the first person to tell you that I was a degenerate. I was a drug addict. I've tattooed for 30 years. I'm involved with the BDSM community. All of these things that, like, I was hypersexual. Like, I spun my gears for years as a result of my trauma, and I'm in the process of trying to be a better person. And that process of trying to be a better person largely involves not doing the things I would rather be doing. I would rather be eating junk food. I would rather be doing drugs. I would rather be drinking alcohol. I would rather be trying to fuck everything that it would have me. But I realize that those are not good for me. These are unhealthy things. And if I pander to every lower desire in my heart or in my mind or in my loins, I would probably end up an obese, drug addicted, alcoholic, masturbatory mess, porn addicted mess, because I only do what feels good and I never put the uncomfortable things ahead of the comfortable things. We're convinced that luxury, our Western luxury, is the acme of human attainment. That's the good life. Well, the good life is no longer having a family and having children that are happy to see mom and dad come home, because that's lame. Getting your dick wet or getting your pussy wet is the acme. Finding your happiness is more important than doing the right thing. And this narrative is very much tied in with what the progressive left want in Western society. The idea that, hey man, if it feels good, do it. You know, if I can find these videos, I'm gonna see if I can look them up. I might have them kicking around. We're straight up seeing people at pride parades saying that bestiality is cool, man. If it floats your boat, who am I to judge?
Do you think it's good for kids to see all of these sexualized things, like people kissing each other, girls kissing each other, guys in thongs, girls with out, yourself?
Yes, because if you don't show them this now, then they harbor who they are as they get older. They feel like they're not included in society.
So you think sexualized activity should begin with them at a young age?
Yes, I mean, I was watching like 8 years old.
And you think that's good?
Yeah.
Should the LGBT be inclusive of bestiality?
I don't even know what that is.
With animals.
I mean, if that's what you want, then that's what you want.
You would accept that?
Yeah.
Well, we are moral fucking people. That's who we are to judge. The people that follow basic biological imperatives for our survival and for our health. We say, guess what? This isn't right. This isn't right. And you know what? I'm not saying that, like, oh, you shouldn't be married if you're gay or any of that stuff, you know, whatever floats your boat. But sooner or later, we need to say enough is enough. Like, if you are legitimately a transgendered individual and you wish to be another gender as a consenting, educated, informed adult, great. Now, does that mean that we have to go into an elementary school and start propagandizing this stuff and propagating the ideology to children that this is an option, this is an option? So how is it then in 1986, the dissociative identity disorder or gender identity disorder was a disorder where 1 in 100,000 people would have it. And now, just last week, I read an article where a school of 250 students, 25% of them identified as the other gender. This is a confusion. This is straight up confusion, and it's being propagated. And if you see anything wrong with it and you ask questions, you're denigrated on popular social media as being a bigot. That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. This is not consenting adults doing consenting adult things. That's the equivalent of taking a kid into a BDSM dungeon and saying, hey, this is how we do it. This is just another expression of sexuality. It's the equivalent of as soon as you're 18 years old, you can go on to OnlyFans and sell pictures of your assholes to make a living. To dirty old men that think it's normal. And everybody says sex work is a normal, viable option for young ladies in our today's society because your family has fallen apart, because your dad wasn't there to teach you how a man is supposed to act. Your mom didn't trust men, and she taught you your whole time growing up that men are pieces of shit. So at the same time, you can exploit them for money and you can objectify yourself, but that's somehow empowerment in the feminist idea. These things are fucked up, and I'm just as bad as the next guy. I was a fucking porn addict for years. I opened my tattoo shop with money made from the porn industry. I worked in porn stores. I know this stuff inside and out. I ran a stripper agency. I was the advocate for women's rights when realistically it made me money. It made me money. And I wouldn't be making money if I didn't advocate for their right to show people their assholes for dollars. And unfortunately, we haven't taken a step back away from what feels good to say, is this right or wrong? Is this good or bad? And the more you step away from that and you go through that uncomfortable process, you start realizing what is right and wrong. And as you start correcting it, this world increasingly reminds me of Sodom and Gomorrah. Like, where are the righteous people left in our fucking society? Are they having to disconnect and move off into the bushes and wood shacks and like only eat what they hunt and burn what they can chop down in the trees and remove themselves from an exploitive society? Because as a progressive, when I was one of the woke masses, I started boycotting the things that I didn't want to agree with or the things that I didn't want to participate in. So I stopped eating meat. And I stopped doing drugs, and I stopped drinking alcohol, and I stopped having such promiscuous sexual behavior. And I started really inventorying how much of our world was revolved around these corrupt institutions. Now, I'll just take one, for example. It's a very easy one because it's the one thing that so many people avoid doing, and it's just eating meat, participating in the meat industry. Now, I'm not saying that my ethics need to be everybody's ethics. Don't get me wrong. This is not where I'm coming from. But let's just hypothetically, or not even hypothetically, can we realistically admit that this is a pretty atrocious system where animals are just shoved in these cages and systematically slaughtered one after another, after another, after another? Like, realistically, an American slaughterhouse can process, that's what they call instead of slaughtering now, so they can process about 3,000 animals a day. That's how many animals are being processed and killed off for human consumption, unnecessary human consumption. Now, that's not for me to say that you need to go out and buy Impossible burgers or to eat crickets or any of this other stuff. There's plenty of food to eat, but it's a system that I just didn't want to participate in on the animals' behalf. I wouldn't want it done to me, so I didn't want to do it to them. Now, as I took a step back from eating meat, I had to educate myself a little bit on how the dairy industry worked and how the egg industry worked. And I'm like, holy shit, that is even worse. It's not necessarily systematic slaughter to the same degree, but we're having chickens with prolapsed birth canals. They're stuck in conditions that, like, I wouldn't want to see my family pet in. So why would I do that to another animal? Why would I want to give some money to the people that are doing that? So this is a part of my personal evolution of ethics, okay? Where I don't want that done to you, so I don't want to participate in it. And my political activism was largely based off that. Well, guess what? I wouldn't want to be treated like the police are treating those black people, so maybe the police shouldn't treat those black people that way, right? Or I wouldn't want to be living somewhere without running water, so maybe those people should have running water. And this is my core ethics. There is right and wrong. Now, that's not virtue signaling where I'm going to just put it on my social media feed and let it rest. I legitimately took the effort in my life to not participate in the things I found exploitive for as long as possible. And then you start to realize that almost every element of our society is exploitive. The equipment that I am recording this podcast on was created by probably slave labor, possibly child labor. The device that you're probably listening to this podcast on is the product of lithium mining. You know, children, like environmental degradation, child labor, exploitive labor practices, all of that. If you are so ethical that you need to take the step away from fossil fuels, you are participating in lithium mining. And it is not a renewable resource any more than oil is, because the batteries need this stuff to operate. The technology isn't there to operate in our environment. Like I said, it's minus 40 yesterday. How can I have an electric car? Our infrastructure isn't there. But at the same time, you're shitting on the oil rig workers that are paying my mortgage, because my clients are oil rig workers. Living where I do, ignored by the East, this is where we make our money, is in this sector. And this sector is a traditional sector, and there are ways of making it work. But there's also a lot of elites making a lot of profit off of this. So we're living in an exploitive system. No matter what you can do, you can't get away from this exploitive system. But if you want to test it out, you can boycott it. Feel free. Boycott oil. See how much you can do. Go vegan on oil and see what your life will look like. But you won't participate in anything that has petroleum in it. You don't participate in any cars, rubber, plastic. You know, if it's got oil in it, you're above it. You won't do it because it's uncomfortable and you can't just virtue signal. So I guess part of our life is recognizing what level of corruption we're willing to tolerate. And maybe I'm the maniac, surrounded by all of this biomechanical lunacy coming in from all corners of exploitation, living in a modern society that is corrupt as fuck. We've got economic elites at the very, very top that are profiting off of basically a labor camp, a farm. Most of the tax-paying citizens in Western cultures are legitimately livestock, not to the degree of the physical labor of livestock in developing nations, which we are the consumers. We live in luxury cages where we can consume, and we figure that we're on the top of the heap, which realistically, if you're living in a first world nation, you're listening to this podcast, you are part of the global 1%. But I find it very, very interesting, the narrative that we are facing here in Western society, North America, Canada, America, England, Ireland, Scotland, Denmark, all of like the Western cultures, that there's a subset of people that are so dissatisfied with their lives, with their luxury, with their privilege, that they still find something to bitch about. That they are still oppressed when they've never really been oppressed in their fucking life.
I wholeheartedly believe that gender is performative, socially constructed, and that we don't need it. Saying that, I'm not really pro abolition of gender, unless it would come even kind of stages. I'm not sure. I haven't really thought about the abolition of gender as a whole, but I think that the world would be a better place if we had never constructed gender. Saying that, the only thing that's hindering me from being completely free of the influence of gender roles, expectations, norms, etc., is my gender dysphoria. The aim of my medical transition is not only to free myself of my dysphoria, but to entirely liberate myself from the grips that gender has on me in all respects. And I think it's very...
There's a ton of philosophies that address this. What are you doing in your life to work towards being the better version of you? To compartmentalize your self-pity and strive towards your self-actualization. You know, anybody who is participating in a heavy dose of self-pity has really abandoned gratitude, a practice of gratitude in their life. Now think about it. If you think about the person, the average victim hero you meet on the street that's like, oh my God, you don't know what's happened to me in my life and how much I've been oppressed, and like me and my gender and my people and my sexuality, we've been shit on our entire existence. How much gratitude for what these people have are they practicing in their life? You know, you go to contemporary therapy practices, you go to pre-colonial indigenous practices, you go to post-colonial, new age practices. All of them talk about a practice of gratitude. Taking 5 minutes, or not even 5 minutes, taking a minute, stepping aside from your own little locus of self-pity and saying, wow, even though these things are up against me, I still have a lot to be thankful for. I'm healthy. I'm warm. I have a full belly. I have hot running water. I have food in my fridge. When 90% of the world doesn't have these things, how much narcissism does a person need to have in order to say, you aren't respecting my boundaries and I'm a fucking victim? Well, and then after hearing this and actually participating in it for quite a while, I started recognizing that we are incredibly selfish. We are incredibly narcissistic. And we haven't compartmentalized our wants for other people's needs. You know, all these people, they talk about, you know, the homeless issue. Like in our small city, Saskatoon here, we're having people in a tent city on the streets, and we're in the middle of fucking nowhere. This isn't even counting Toronto, Vancouver, San Francisco, LA, New York, where the urban decay is to such a degree that legitimate cities like Vancouver, East Hastings, Maine, there's needles up and down that street. Like they're decriminalizing drugs so these people won't clog up the arrest or to the legal system, so they won't clog up the jails. So they're decriminalizing drugs, but they aren't addressing the core existential malaise and the trauma that's causing these people to use and to not feel that their basic needs are being met. Now, these people, despite their abuse, they're looking for a temporary heaven. They're looking for that temporary pleasure. They're looking for that moment of escape from their self-pity because they've never been given the narrative or the skill set on how to compartmentalize and pass through their pain and their discomfort and their tears and their hurt towards the pride that comes from winning that battle. They've never had to slay the dragon. That dragon has always slayed them. And what's ended up happening is a very sly adversary came along, and it was desire in one method or another, and says, don't you know that all your pain will go away if you just use this thing? Here you go. You want the drug? Here it is. You want the sex? Here it is. You want the gambling? Here it is. You want that dopamine fix one way or another? Here it is. You want your internet shopping? Here it is. You want that tasty junk food? Here it is. And that desire manipulated us so we didn't have to feel our pain. And then this huge advertising monopoly arose based off of manipulating our desire for profit. And these people made a lot of money off of our desire and our luxury and our comfort and are confusing those things for our needs. These are not physiological needs. Your comfort is not a physiological need. Sugar, fat, and salt is not a physiological need. This is an ego want. So they've confused our wants for needs, convinced us that our wants are our needs, where brand names are important to keep up with the Joneses, to impress people you don't like with things you can't afford. This is the premise of Fight Club. Like, these are legitimate things that are hidden in popular culture if you know where to look. You can take a look at the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche when he talked about the transition between the Untermensch to the Übermensch, the underman, subhuman, to the overman, or superhuman. The transition between the underman, who is just one of the slave morality herd, who does a hard, rigorous self-evaluation and self-refinement process to become more than what he was, turns into the man that appears monstrous to those that don't want to do the work. And they end up being called a name. Whatever that name is over the time. They could be heretics at one time. They could have been outcasts at one time. They could have been called whatever. Maybe now in 2022, the common one is fascist. You're the worst guy in the world because you believe in a regimented system of self-work versus this great, wonderful luxury that we all have given at our feet and at our fingertips. You know, as we become obese, we might as well get intravenous hookups for our sugar, fat, and salt to 7-Eleven supplied IV drips everywhere around. They just go in and all of your needs are met. You've got the internet, you've got Netflix, you've got everything you need. You got the dopamine fix of your social media posting. You've got all of your artificial likes and your artificial social networks. So they can lock you in your house for extended periods of time And they could test it out. They could do it for 10 days at a time and say, oh, it's due to the health regulations. Don't worry, you're going to get free internet. And we'll deliver you your sugar, fat, and salt, and everything will be hunky-dory. And your pornography, don't get me wrong, your right hand is your new lover. You don't need a family. You don't need substantial, vital existence. We've replaced it with liberation, with the liberation to stay at home, plugged into a device, and not really have to do any self-work. You don't need to be able to lift up 10 pounds or touch your toes. You don't need to be able to connect to another human being face-to-face through conversation. You can do it through arbitrary, anonymous interactions by leaving messages on an internet. And they leave messages back, and you mistake that for human interaction. And this transition creates people. You have television shows telling you about the shut-ins.
My size, baby. You don't. No, it is. There's stuff you can do. You want to be a big baby about everything. Baby, you're a baby. Your first. Bitch, I'm big grown. I pay my bills are paid.
These people can't even get in and out their door, and they sit there and bitch at each other. You don't know what it's like to be me. You don't know what it's like to be me. Of course not. I don't want to know what it's like to be you. I want to be able to move. I want to be able to grow. I want to be able to create. And guess what? I'm considered a fucking bigot for saying it out loud. When you say that this is not normal life, people shouldn't be shut in their houses. You should be able to stand with the strength of your own 2 feet. This is not healthy. This idea healthy at any size. And if you say otherwise, you're the worst guy ever. If you encourage people to just go into the gym and get on a treadmill. Oh my God, you bigoted gatekeeper. I can't believe you're shaming someone. What is wrong with shame? Our entire culture for thousands of years was based on the collective saying yes and no. As a BDSM practitioner, I know that that's a basement, private activity between consenting adults. It is not something to be paraded around on the streets of a city during a pride parade, being an exhibitionist and shoving my fetish tastes in the faces of people that are there with their children that just want to be proud that maybe they're bisexual. I should be able to walk as a regular citizen with my potentially bisexual daughter in the pride parade at 11 years old without seeing a trans friend of mine shaking her balls in a thong with a feather boa in front of my child. What the fuck is going on in your head? I recognize that there's a time and a place. And society recognizes that there's a time and a place. And they say, guess what? If you're doing that degenerate shit, keep it in your degenerate spaces. If you're practicing BDSM stuff, don't bring it to an elementary school. Today, there's an organization, they're called Project Veritas. What they do is undercover exposés of liberal academia, liberal media. So they go on dates with these people, and they basically record what they say on dates when these people think they're being anonymous. A school dean was talking about how he invited a gender educator into an elementary school with lube and butt plugs and condoms to show these kids that how to use lubricant, children, elementary school, how to use lubricant instead of spit on their assholes.
I've been the dean for 4 years. During Pride, we do a Pride Week every year, and I had like our LGBTQ plus health center come in. They were passing around butt plugs and dildos to my students, talking about queer sex, using lube versus using spit.
Who is this?
This is an LGBTQ plus health center came in to talk to my high school students.
Nice.
They're just like passing around dildos, butt plugs. The kids are just playing with them, looking at them.
In the school?
In a classroom.
Wow.
Yeah. While I'm sitting there. Then we had a drag queen come in, pass out cookies and brownies and do photos.
It's so amazing. And everybody's cool with that, like the butt plugs and the dildos. Nobody complains.
No.
I mean, if the parents found out, would they?
No. It's queer sex. This is the drag queen that came in.
What's her name?
Alexis Bevels.
Alexis Devil.
And just hung out in my classroom.
And was there?
Or hung out in my office.
You have so much freedom, and so much wiggle room.
So much freedom. So much money.
I mean, having
To do stuff.
trustees are okay with that too? They don't know.
They would. It's like I wouldn't even like run it by them. Like, why would I run it by them? They would be like, "Oh my god, that's wonderful."
Like, how old were the kids with the classroom?
14, 18. They're like, how does this work? How do we do, like, how does this work?
Right.
So yeah, that's a really like cool part of my job is I don't have to worry about stuff like that.
When I was in grade 8, it took to grade 8 but before they told us what testicles and ovaries were for. As a matter of fact, they still separated the boys from the girls to explain the girls why they had their period once in a month and explain to the boys why they were having wet dreams. This is health education. Now, shoving shit up your ass for entertainment is not health education. This is not what you need to be teaching fucking children. And then we turn around and we see a profit-based pharmaceutical industry, profit-based, that comes along and says, are you ready for us to diagnose your normal reactions to this fucked up society as mental illness so we can get you addicted to mind-altering drugs and keep medicating you for all the side effects? Now, if you say fucking no, you're branded as the heretic. You're branded as a radical. Some fucking asshole on Twitter is going to say that you're the radical right. So yes, I really believe we are in a culture war. They say it all the time on Twitter, the culture war, but nobody's really talking about what's actually going on. And I am a progressive. I am, once upon a time, woke, until woke ran so fucking far to the left, it is unrecognizable what they are trying to do. It is a profoundly sick society that regards tolerance as a good thing, regardless of the thing being tolerated.
Hierarchy is fundamental to our concept of order. To evaluate things, we need to set up an ideal, something perfect, so that we can measure things against it. Determine what is good, what is better, what is best, what is undesirable. The word hierarchy actually comes from a Greek word, hieros, that means sacred or holy. So the idea is a timeless order, a holy order. There are a lot of people challenging the idea that we should have hierarchy at all, that we should have ideals, that we should judge what is good, better, and best. And they're acting out of compassion, but unfortunately, they're also creating chaos, disorder, and disorientation. And that chaos will be exploited by more powerful actors, friends of their own.
Gatekeeping people that stepped out of line once kept the tradition of a language, of culture, of food, of music, of a culture in one direction, because people recognized when things were straying too far from that, you need to either get back on boat or you're outside of the mainstream society. You don't widen the berth of mainstream society to accept the most degenerate among us and then say that's your society. That is how a society is dismantled. And those individuals in academia that keep writing this into peer-reviewed studies and change the science to align with their socio-political agenda are as much to blame as the degenerates themselves. Somewhere along the line, rational logic was replaced by political ideology in academia, where these left-leaning individuals will say, where is your study on this thing that you're saying? Well, I don't know. I've got 6,000 years worth of traditional history of different cultures behind me in my bookshelf. Was any of that taught to you in your peer-reviewed science? Well, no, we disregard traditional like superstitions and spirituality because science hasn't proven God. Well, okay, what about common ethics? What about the consequences of exposing children to sexually explicit material, sexual interference, and the trauma that's caused, and then the toxic coping mechanisms that are a consequence of that trauma? Are we allowed to talk about that? Well, that's a very nuanced question. It's very complicated. Well, yeah, because you don't want to admit the fact that toxic coping mechanisms are the consequences of trauma, but you people are traumatizing people day after day after day by exposing them to sexually inappropriate material at increasing younger and younger ages, where you have 15-year-old children telling other children on TikTok how to properly transition their gender when they're just seeking for identity.
Yeah, I think it was around like 10 as well when I started questioning if I was bi, and then since then it was kind of like a a slippery slope because I was like, am I bi, omni, lesbian? And then I kind of like came to the point, and then now recently I've been like, am I pan? But then I think now I'm starting to realize that I'm queer. But yeah, it started around 10. It wasn't like fully formed, but I guess like that's when I realized, wait, that's a possibility. Yeah, I am genderqueer, transmasc, and queer.
What's transmasc?
Transmasc is like people under the non-binary umbrella identifying like or presenting masc.
Masculine?
Yeah.
What about you?
I'm trans and my sexuality is unlabeled. I use he, him pronouns.
Yeah, and I use he, they pronouns.
A young girl getting her period for the first time, noticing her body changing and not being comfortable with it, now being propagated and groomed online to say that's because you're not a girl. If you can't relate to your changing body, that's because you're a boy trapped inside a girl's body. Don't have children. That's going to destroy our planet. Just be a non-binary, lesbian, and everybody's going to work out great. Despite the fact that 40% of us kill each other or kill ourselves after we transition, that doesn't matter. Just transition. The internet virus, that is the woke culture, will be the downfall of our culture. So when I say that World War III is a spiritual war, and we need to recognize good from bad. Aldous Huxley, the author of Brave New World, in Brave New World, the population, depending on your strata of socioeconomic advantage, had different versions of a drug called Soma that was given to people. And I got to shut it down because I'm starting to get frazzled, but I'm going to leave you with this quote from Aldous Huxley. And I believe this was like maybe in the 50s that he was talking about. And he said, now, in his original quote, he said that there would be a pharmacological method, a pharmaceutical method. I believe now that it is a digital method. So I'm going to change the quote from pharmacological, pharmaceutical towards digital, and I will say the quote that Aldous Huxley said after writing Brave New World. There will be, in the next generation or so, a digital method of making people love their servitude and producing dictatorship without tears, so to speak. Producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies so that people will in fact have their liberties taken away from them, but will rather enjoy it, because they will be distracted from any desire to rebel by propaganda or brainwashing enhanced by digital methods. And this seems to be the final revolution of those in power. This is the final subjugation of people, is our addiction to technology, our addiction to convenience, our addiction to luxury, to the degree that we avoid the hard work to be better fucking human beings. Now, I love the fact that I'm just a comedian. I'm just an entertainer. This is just an editorial. It's one man's opinion, the Pitboss Review. You could take it or leave it. You can call me whatever name you want. I am not sponsored. I am not doing this for money. This is completely free. If you like it, share it with friends. Press the subscribe button. I hope you come back. I'm going to be doing these a little bit more regularly. My random thought association and free flow. Good luck, friends and families. Good luck, comrades. Do the right thing and be a better person. I hope you tune back in again. Peace, love, and granola.